as a distance runner early on in your life, you were an All-American at North Carolina now there's some dispute about this, either the 800 or the 880 meters, because when I looked up the records in the North Carolina Track and Field Media Guide, you don't exist because I think you ran 880 meters, and that's been stricken from the records. They only have 800-meter records now, so there's no evidence that you were actually there.
We were yards back in the 70s, 880 and the mile. We've now become the 1,500 meter and the 800 meter. So you're right, back in 1975, I finished second in the state of New York to Don Page, who ended up by 1980, 5 years later, he was the number one 800 meter runner in the world, had beaten Sebastian Coe, the world record holder, to get the number one ranking. And so I went from high school in New York on Long Island. My father starts the real track and field story. He was the Canadian record holder in the mile and 800 meters. He was the last Canadian not to break the 4-minute mile back in the 1950s. And he left Canada, came to New York, ended up at NYU, was an All-American at NYU, married my mother, and after some other movements around the country, ended up at the Stony Brook School, which is the oldest Christian private boarding school in the United States. My father started as an English teacher and track coach and choir director, and I grew up on the campus of the boarding school. All the athletes were my heroes. I wanted to be like all the best athletes. My father coached me with another great track and field coach, Marvin Goldberg, who's now resting in peace. We were just an amazing little tiny school with my graduating class of 63 students, but from 40 countries around the world. Yeah, I finished second in the New York State meet. We ran one of the fastest 4x400 meter relays at the Penn Relays. That got me a track and field scholarship to the University of North Carolina, where I excelled and ran well. Was able to then run for the New York Athletic Club and Nike and also Adidas as a pro following college. Ran in Europe, ran in Asia, raced in those places. And by 1980, my coach retired at age 77 or so. He retired, and he nominated a few of his former athletes to take over as his head track and field coach replacement. And Don Lockerbie at age 23 had ripped my calf muscle and was really having to look at retirement as an athlete. And so when I got the phone call from my coach asking if I would want to be considered as a head or an assistant coach, I applied. I got the job. I became the director of track and field for the University of North Carolina at age 23 in 1981. I tried to make the 1980 Olympic team. I didn't. That calf muscle got in the way. We didn't go anyway. The Moscow Olympics was effectively canceled by the United States. Oh, well, it wasn't canceled. The Brits ran and won races we would have hoped to beat them in. But in any case, didn't get the 1980 gig, but became the head coach at North Carolina. And it's a good story of how maybe that translates. I've only had a bachelor degree in history, basically, at the University of North Carolina, military history, by the way, World War I, a specialty. But I felt like I got my master's degree from the university as a 5-year head track and field coach, where on my first week on the job, I got a phone call by the basketball office. Now, those of you who may know a little bit about Tar Heel basketball would be surprised to hear that the secretary said, "Coach, welcome to being the new head coach of track and field. Coach Dean Smith would like to come see you." And I was like, well, I'd be happy to march down the hallway to him. No, he's on his way. Well, I didn't hang up 30 seconds, and there's Dean Smith at my door. Now, you have to understand, my track and field office was the size of a closet, and his was the size of a suite, probably at the Waldorf Astoria. But anyway, he came in with a young assistant coach named Roy Williams. So the two of them came in and asked if they could take me out to our running track. And we walked out to the running track of North Carolina and looked at it. And he goes, "Don, this is the worst track in the ACC." And I said, "I know, I ran on it for 4 years. It's not something to be proud of." I said, "The grandstand's great. We have 8,000 seats, and we share it with soccer and lacrosse, who are busy winning national championships. But yeah, we have this asphalt running track at North Carolina." This is 1981. And he goes, "What do you need to do to make it the best in the country?" I said, "Well, I've raced all over the world. I would know what a world-class running track would look like. I have no idea what it costs." He said, "We'll find out." Well, I found out that a world-class running track in 1981 was going to cost about $1.5 million if you also add a video board and get all the new hurdles and pole vault equipment, things like that. But the long story is that Dean Smith said to me, and I've used this ever since. He says, Don, sports facilities are like the front porch of a stately home. Certainly not the most important room in the house, but it's the first thing everybody sees. And it's true. You can go to any high school in America. You can't walk in and see the library. You can't walk in and see the chemistry lab, but you can drive around and see the football stadium, the baseball stadium, the tennis courts, and the track. And if they're in good shape, you can pretty well assume probably the library is good and the chemistry lab is good too. And if they're terrible, you can probably assume the same with those. So Dean Smith taught me that. And I said, but Coach, why do you need it? He said, because we run on it every day. And I've got recruits saying, well, Duke's better, UCLA is better, Villanova's got a nicer track, Georgetown has a better facility, all the big competitors. I'm going to help you. A few months later, Dean Smith helped me raise $4 or $5 million. And in the next year, we built arguably the best running track in the country and an indoor facility as well. And that just opened the door for me because while I enjoyed coaching, I just fell in love with the fact that I got to design this spectacular track facility. And who did I use? I used the university architect and the university engineer who had no previous experience, nor did I, and the indoor facility, the same. And then I realized there's really no consultants out there that could actually help you do this. So I decided in the summer of 1982, I think, to put out an ad. It's the only ad I've ever put out in Track and Field News, a magazine probably none of your listeners would ever know. Track and Field News put an ad out and said, if you're designing or building a new track and field facility, contact International Sports Management, ISM, I called myself, and sat back to see who would call. Duke, Southern Cal, University of South Carolina, Brown, and Princeton all called me in the next month. I got part-time gigs designing their running tracks, and I was off and running. And that's the start of my venue development business since 1981. At North Carolina, I coached in Adidas, and it's back to Dean Smith for a quick second to finish this story. Michael Jordan, you might have heard of, was a fairly good basketball player at North Carolina and had made a few shots in his time. But in 1984, I got a second phone call from Dean Smith who said, would you come down to my office? So this time I went down to the basketball office where I sat in a room with, again, Roy Williams, the assistant coach, and Dean, and a gentleman named Michael Jordan. And Dean said to me that Michael's desperate to make the Olympic team. I said, oh, he deserves it. Why isn't Bobby Knight, the basketball coach, already taking him? He goes, well, that might happen, but we think Michael can beat Carl Lewis in the long jump. I said, I would love to give him a try. Well, what do we have to do? Well, long story, we created a plan. Michael came out for the track team for 3 weeks, never took a measured jump. We were too nervous to get an injury out of it, but he was doing pop-ups at 24 feet, which just meant he took like 10 steps and would pop and go 24 feet. And we're slowly helping him understand speed and get to the takeoff board. And just as we were ready to enter him in his first track and field meet to try it, Bobby Knight did in fact call and make Jordan part of the 1984 basketball team. And Michael's track career ended on the spot. However, back in those days, Dean Smith was a Converse man, and all basketball uniforms and shoes were Converse. And the deal for me to get Michael Jordan on the track team is that I had to outfit him in Adidas. And I did, because that was the shoe company he really wanted to do business with. And it's well marked that that's what he wanted. But Nike came in and made the deal of a lifetime, obviously. A big mistake for Adidas. But in any case, those are my two Adidas stories, Peter. Kenny Smith, by the way, a year or two later, did come out and ran the 100 and the 4x100 meter relay for me at North Carolina. So those are my coaching prowesses.
So you touched on Michael Jordan. Your brush with Michael Jordan at North Carolina. The other guy I wanted to ask you about in that time frame that you would have been on campus as an athlete and as a coach, Lawrence Taylor. Do you have any Lawrence Taylor stories?
Every summer, there was a pretty hot softball league in Chapel Hill. A lot of athletes would come back, and we'd all find our way onto somebody's softball team. And the team that I got put on one year was called the Unusual Suspects. So we were a bunch of coaches. So I had lacrosse and soccer and a few sports medicine trainers on the team. My brother was on the team with me. And not that I was a good baseball player, but somehow I ended up at shortstop on the night that we played Lawrence Taylor's basically ex-football players' softball team. And I will only tell you that the rule was that if you were ever more than 7 runs behind, the game was going to be called. But we were losing 21. They scored 21 runs on us in the very first inning. So we had to get up and bat. I stopped the ball at shortstop with everything but my glove. I had bruises on my forehead, my knees, my ankles, my shoulders. They just were nailing home runs and balls, and Lawrence was just laughing and basically calling all of us coaches a bunch of losers, which were all 20 years older than most of them. But it was a great night. It was fun. We made it to the bottom of the first inning, so it was a 1-inning game. I think we lost 21-7. I think we did score 7 runs too, and that was it. That was my real opportunity to spend a fun night. And there might have been some beer drinking after that game, but we can't talk about that.
Who in your eyes was the better athlete, raw athlete, Lawrence Taylor or Michael Jordan?
Can I tell you that the best athlete I ever met at North Carolina is a guy no one has ever heard of? But he was from Aruba, and he actually played on the North Carolina basketball team. But prior to coming to the United States to play on Dean's basketball team, he was on the Aruban World Cup team that actually allowed him to play for Holland. So he played, I believe, in the 1974 World Cup for the Dutch. Not saying he started. And then in the 1976 Olympics, he ran for Aruba in the 100 meters. And then he came to North Carolina. His name is Randy Weil, Weil. He went on to be a European basketball player and the head basketball coach, I believe, at UNC Asheville. But Peter, when you talk about an Aruban athlete who could play basketball with Michael Jordan, swim in the same pool as Mark Spitz, and play football with Neeskens and Cruyff, the best athlete I ever knew. Plus, he played a mean jazz guitar. And then because he ran on the track team with us in 1976-77, I ended up being his touring roommate because I was the good boy on the track team, and the coach decided that Lockerbie better babysit Randy Weil or else Dean might be upset. So I'll tell you, he's the greatest athlete that I know that no one's ever heard of, because he didn't make the finals in the 100-meter swim. He didn't make the finals in the 100-meter dash. He did play at North Carolina, but was never a star. Ran on our track team as an older athlete, and just an amazing character and an amazing person. But yeah, he would have been somebody that Jordan would know and knows. And I did enjoy having Kenny Smith on my team for 100 meters. I had a few football players triple jump and throw the shot. And I will also tell you that Jack Nicklaus's son, Jackie, was on the golf team at North Carolina, was there. And he would come out and run on the track. And I swear I could have made Jackie Nicklaus a very good 800-meter runner. I always wanted to. He and Davis Love were roommates, and they would come out and jog on the track. And Jackie would do sprints. And I said, listen, if you don't make it in golf, I can make you a good 800-meter runner. Those are my days at Chapel Hill.
Is there anybody left out? There's just names falling left and right off the table here.
Be a Tar Heel to love those names. You'd have to be a Tar Heel to love those names.